my blonde hair out here getting my T-bars on. But instead of a TLC bop, I feel like a good Monica. Just one of them days that a girl goes through. I'm really inside. Don't want to take it out on you. Just one of them days. Don't take it personal. I just want to be all alone. Do you think I did you wrong? Shout out to Monica, who's also a member of Atlanta, and at this point of this recording, the Stacey Abrams, who is our fearless leader in While Justice Sleeps, conceded the election to Brian Kemp. What's going on in Georgia? I don't know. But that was on a heavy note. On a brighter note, we have so much to talk about. So all right, let's gather ourselves. Hi friends, welcome back to Save Black Girl Reads, where I am your host, Ariel, the best friend in your head that you never knew that you needed, but you are so glad that you have. Welcome back, friends, to week 2 of Stacey Abrams' While Justice Sleeps, where we are reading a fictional read just for the fun of it. There's nothing tied to it. There's no theological doctrine. There's no scriptural based text. There's no autobiographical book or thing going on here. This is pure, good old fashioned. I'm just reading it because I can and I enjoy it. So let's just dive right in, right? So but before we do, let me just kind of give you a thing of the inner workings before and empty my brain of this before I actually lose it. I would usually save it for the end of the video, but friend, I gotta tell you this now. Okay, so here's the pattern that I found out. Stacey is giving us chapters by way of days. And so y'all saw how I cut the video and of the previous video for this book. That's essentially the gist of what we're going to be doing for the remainder of the book. And we have 2 more weeks after we go over this week. The 2 weeks that will be chapters 34 through 45, which will cover, I guess, like Friday through Sunday, and then we will pick up 46 through 53, and that will be Monday through Wednesday, based off of how she structured the book, because she's structuring the book by certain days. So I want to say we covered like a Sunday, like a Saturday, a Sunday, and a Monday for week 1, or maybe just a Sunday and a Monday, because a lot took place to build up all the things. So in this review, we are going over Tuesday, June 20th, Wednesday, June 21st, and Thursday, June 22nd. So that's where we're going. This is the ride that we're going on. So let's just jump right in to Tuesday, June 20th. Avery is out here in these streets. She's caught up because, she went with Jared to talk about the things with her with his dad and her boss. Well, essentially, he dropped her off. He gave her like a polite kiss on the cheek to say goodnight, and then she crawled back into her apartment. Well, press got a hold to it, and they leaked the video the following day. On top of that, she woke up to $500,000 in her account that was not there the previous night before. So we asked the question, friend, how did it get there? So that was essentially chapter 18, because she opens into this whole interrogation, because she's in this room with Chief Roseborough, Major William Vance, and the FBI agent Robert Lee. And essentially what is happening is they think that she's possibly guilty of something else because this money has essentially come out of nowhere. And so they're trying to figure out who's paying her, possibly paying her off, what the motive is around the money and everything like that. So in chapter 19, what essentially happens is Avery can't give too many details. She doesn't want to give like the reasonings why she met with Jared, the things that they talked about or anything like that, because she doesn't trust all of the ears that are in the vicinity, right? So when Chief Roseboro is questioning her and asking her the question, she's standing on her laurels of, I'm not going to share this information with you, which then forces Chief Roseboro to essentially put her on an administrative leave. And so this kind of spawns a whole bunch of other stuff where now she is moving into like thinking about like giving up the power of attorney and being the legal guardian. And so she goes to Justice Wynn's lawyer, Noah, and she asks him like, hey, can I get out of this or no? And essentially what she learns is that there are so many different steps in this power of attorney and so many different steps in the will and testament of Howard Wynn, or Justice Howard Wynn, that it's ironclad. So even if she wanted to get out of it, it would put her in a predicament, or it would put, basically she's already up the creek because she's on administrative leave. If she quit now, the reality is it will put her up a creek in a very detrimental way to where the second wife, Celeste, who's in cahoots with William Vance, would essentially have the power of attorney. And we already know that she's going to kill him. She's going to kill Howard Wynn and just take him off of life support or take him out of, she's going to unplug the machine. So in chapter 20, what Avery finds out is that it's an ironclad. It's like we talked about, Justice Wynn has created an ironclad will. But what we find out is that there's a codicil there that that essentially is missing from the will. So now Avery and Noah Avery more so is on a scavenger hunt to find the other portion of that will. And so, which leads us into chapter 21, where she is entering into Justice Wynn's house per Noah's instructions. She found out, and we also find out that Nigel Cooper is the one behind the $500,000 that is in her account. She didn't know that this morning, in the morning when she was being interrogated, but Nigel Cooper has essentially outed himself with a phone call and basically saying that, it's kind of forcing her. This is an incentive to force her to do what's best on the behalf of Justice Howard Wynn and to keep him alive for the Supreme Court ruling. She gets to the house, she does the thing, she undoes she tampers with the alarm, turns the alarm off because she has the codes, because again, based off of Noah's instructions, she goes to a safe, she looks up the things, and then we realize that Avery been knocked over the head with a gun. And so then we jump into chapter 22, where we see that whoever has hit her over the head made it look like it was a theft scene and not an information gathering scene. And so when Avery comes to, she sees everything strewn around, but she also notices that documents and stuff like that are missing. And so she calls Noah and she calls Jared. She has them meet her at a Starbucks. She gets in a taxi cab and does the things. Robert Lee, the FBI agent, meets her there, but she's not really there to talk to him. They pretty much have exchanges and stuff like that. The FBI is essentially trying to warn her that her life could possibly be in danger, and he hasn't decided whether or not she's guilty, but he's also wanting her to be safe because she is the POA, the designated POA and the legal guardian over Justice Wynn. So he's just wanting to caution her to be careful. But essentially, Avery meets with Noah, the lawyer, and Jared, the son, to kind of inform them of what happened. And so in chapter 23, what we see is that after this meeting has commenced, Avery gets into a taxi and she gets a phone call from Chief Roseboro's office. Basically, they called her to let her know that Rita is down to the Supreme Court, talking to the Chief Justice Roseboro. And we learn that she's there not for any coked up reason or anything like that, but she's essentially there to kind of advocate for her kid, because Avery's character and a lot of things are being questioned at this point. In that particular conversation, is pretty much kind of confirmed of like my inklings that I talked about last week I think that Chief Roseboro is going to try to give some protection to Avery the best way that she can, and it does. And what we find out is that is actually true. Chief Roseboro is kind of like a buffer and kind of a protector, but she's also wanting to follow the rules because, again, she's a stickler for rules. So what is happening is that Chief Roseboro let her know, like, Avery, you might not want to call here, might not be safe. Wait till I call you, basically. And we get to chapter 24, where what I'm now calling the meetings of Jared and Noah and Avery all together is Wind's Wonderful 3, and that's what they will be named for the remainder of the book. So the Wind's Wonderful 3 have another meeting, but they go to Noah's office at the law firm. And so essentially they were trying to figure out and decode what VGS meant. Is the first wife's name and Georgia and Cabin. Avery also solved a chess game sequence. She has decoded some things through sequence of a chess game that Justice Wind was playing, and essentially what she has found out is that Ani is a doctor, and there's more to come in the further chapters. The information. Okay, so in chapter 25, President Stokes, we realize, is behind Nurse Jamie's death. I said he was corrupt. I said he was out here with the shenanigans. We already knew that, but just to kind of confirm it, chapter 25 confirms it. And then we realize that William Vance is in a space of trying to, because he is working for the president, what they're trying to do is they're trying to incapacitate Avery from her duties as the power of attorney as best as possible, because they're trying to keep any representation of Howard Wynn. They're trying to keep that away from the Supreme Court and any other type of, just keep him away. So we are introduced in chapter 25 to Ken Neighbors, who is the Senate Majority Leader. And basically, he was tipped off by Nigel Cooper, the head of GenWorks Labs. He was tipped off by Nigel of President Stokes' plan to move a Supreme Court justice into the Supreme Court while the House and the Senate are on recess. Ken Neighbors knows this information, and he tested out at a particular dinner that's happening in chapter 25 with the president. And so what we learn is President Stokes can't stand Ken Neighbors, and Ken Neighbors can't stand him. But he was going there to see, Ken Neighbors was going to that particular event to seek out the information to see if what Nigel Cooper said was true. It was. And so there's also, I believe Ken Neighbors is the Senate Majority Leader. And then there's a House Leader by the name of Dubose. And he's trying to get Dubose to also keep the Congress members there, and Ken Neighbors is trying to move in with the Senate members, and essentially trying to keep as many people as they can there off of the recess. Instead, he's trying to plan to pack the court so that they can get more Democratic candidates into the Supreme Court as well. And so his thought process is, we give him this Supreme Court justice, we also ask for one. And so essentially we got to get a Democratic leader in there to put another Democrat in there. And so by the time people start to phase out, we have a young Democrat in there, we have another Democrat, and then whoever takes Justice Winn's seats, we also want it to be Democratic. And so his thought process is, yeah, he put that one in there, but we have three. So Ken's idea is to take this information and use it to pack the court. And I was like, this is such an, like Ken Neighbors is such an opportunist. But I think it's because I have a 360 view of everything that's going on, and this is like the minute, this is a small thing in a bigger picture. And so that I think I kind of got a little annoyed with that, but I mean, that's essentially what would happen in government. I think Stacey Abrams is doing a fantastic job of giving this to things by way of just they wanted to pack the Supreme Court for Democratic candidates because they didn't want to see more Republicans in the Supreme Court than Democrats, because then at that point they could overturn Roe v. Wade. And I said, Stacey the Abrams, girl, are you prophetic? Like, what's going on? And see, this is why I will say this, because here's the thing. Stacey, this book came out April 2022, right? I looked it up. The overturning of Roe v. Wade happened June of 2022. This book came out before. And Stacey had been working on this book for years, pitching this idea of a political legal thriller. So at this point, I was like, Stacey is prophetic. She knows the Lord. She know him. She served him, and he talked to her because she put it in the book. That's it. That's all. That's it. That's all. Okay, moving on to chapter 26. And in chapter 26, we have now transitioned over to Wednesday, June 21st. So on June 21st, so Wynn's Wonderful 3 has now turned into Wynn's Wonderful 4. That is Avery, the lawyer Noah, the son Jared, and Avery's roommate Ling. The four meet at Avery and Ling's apartment, and what we learn is that the reference of Ani is in the river. Ani is Dr. A.K. Ramji, or Dr. Ani Kandahar Ramji. And what we learn is that he works for Hygeia on a gene therapy that could cure Borson's disease, Parkinson's disease, Huntington's disease by getting rid of faulty chromosome triggers. Then Hygeia got acquired by Advar Biogenetics. So once the acquiring took place, Ramji's research trail goes cold for almost like 18 months or a year and a half. Ramji was having conversations with Justice Wynn. In the conversations between Justice Wynn and Ramji, or Dr. Ani, is that he fears for his life because everybody who worked with him on specific projects concerning the genetics and the work that he was doing at Hygeia is dead. And so there's also concern of the use of his research for genetic weaponization. So then we move on to chapter 27, where Wynn's Wonderful 4, or the WW4 as I'm coining them right now, believe that Dr. Ani may be off the grid and he may be in the US. That could be the thought process. They plan to use Nigel Cooper's money to track him down. And what we learn is that Hygeia bought Advar with the understanding that they would silence Dr. Ani. And at the same time, we also learn in chapter 27 that Hygeia was experimenting on a Muslim minority population in India based off of the genetics. So yeah. Then we go to chapter 28. The WW4 are uncovering a lot of stuff here, friend. We flash over to a Dr. Elizabeth Papalea, who goes by Betty, and she is the head of strategy, policy, and budget for the Science and Technology Directorate. What we learn from Betty's research is that she has discovered over $300 million of grant money was spent on chromosomal research over 5 years, but there is no paperwork confirming the grants were published, awarded, or reported on. So my thought process was, is this Tigress? Like, did this go towards the efforts of Tigress? And was this money laundered through the grants? Like, I have questions about these particular things. But then we maneuver over into chapter 29, where we find out that William Vance has a skunk works team that is basically tracking the W4, Betty Papaleo, Justice Wynn, and Nigel Cooper. And they're also watching Avery's mom to try to use her as leverage if needed. So what we also learned is that the $300 million over 5 years. Can we just talk about that for a moment? Friend, lean in. $300 million over 5 years. 5 of them, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 years. What are you spending the money on, if not on the science and technology? And also, can people, like, the fact that this money is being shuffled through this space is like, where's this money actually coming from? Who's actually in charge of it? And why? So what we learned is that Vance is the one behind the $300 million over 5 years. Can I say that I'm shocked by it? Just like completely shocked? No. But I think my bigger question is, what are you spending this money on? And then the thought process is like, probably the operations of the Skunk Works team, and it probably does somehow tie to Tigress. Okay, so then we also learn that Vance sent a team to Georgia ahead of Avery and Jared, because Avery and Jared are going to the Vivian, Georgia cabin, right? To go find the next clue. Because basically this is now turned into a scavenger hunt hosted by none other than the brain dead Howard Wynn. The team member that Vance has sent has instructed that team member to kill them once they get the information from Wynn that he hid in the cabin. So that was all of Wednesday, June 21st. Now we're gonna cover Thursday, June 22nd, and this is gonna be the wrap up for us, and then we gotta talk about some things, friend, because I'm just like, ooh, wow. Thursday, June 20th starts off on chapter 30, and what we learn is that Avery and Jared have gotten to the cabin, and Avery knows that someone has been there before. Basically, they now know that somebody's in the cabin, and they have to work quickly because somebody's already been there before them. So essentially, they find the next clue in this scavenger hunt. And let me tell you something. Justice Howard Wynn is not playing games, even though he has turned this into a game, because essentially they thought that the code, I think it was like a 310774. I think that's the code that's been going on. Essentially, they thought that it was something for an alarm system or something like that could have been connected at the code. But no, it is not. Y'all, it's the constellations that they created in the roof when Jared was sick one summer at the cabin. And Jared had to flip the bed, and Avery had to find the letters. And so there's an envelope, he leaves everything in there. There's a letter for Avery, there's a letter for Jared. And so essentially it's pretty much an encouragement of them to continue on in the scavenger hunt, because there's so much that's going on. So that leads us into chapter 21. So they find the clue. They realize that they have only one more week to find the rest of the scavenger hunt, or her power of attorney and her legal guardianship goes to Celeste without default because of the time limit if they can't figure this out and solve this in time. We also find out that Wynn was the one who filed the documents for the $300 million that Betty Papalea is now having to go to a hearing for. And then when Jared and Avery try to move to leave the house. I don't know why. I don't know why Avery decided to do this, but she was like, I want to go check out the dock. Like, girl, aren't you the one who announced that someone had already been there? And Jared, aren't you the one who also said that y'all got to move quickly because someone is watching y'all? Why would you then say, yeah, you should go down to the dock? I'm not gonna go, because he's having a whole bunch of nostalgic flashbacks. But you then let her go down there and he's watching her, but essentially he's watching her so intently that he don't know that the skunk worker is walking up on him and about to do a pow pow. Like, what? Anywho, so yeah, skunk worker comes in, attempts to kill them. Jared dodges a bullet. He and the skunk worker are tussling and stuff like that. And then Jared and Avery pretty much get away, but just barely, because he shoots out the windshield as they're trying to, like, you know, back up and go in the directions that they need to go. So chapter 32 jumps back in with Betty Papaleo and Avery entering into a chat room together based off of Betty's research that led her to looking up Hygeia, Advar, and haplogroups on the internet. From that chat, they agreed to meet at the Lincoln Memorial on the following day. So after the chat and further research, Betty prepped to send a box of documents to Nigel Cooper as her insurance policy, because now, after all of her research and all of the things that she's doing, she knows that this is a hot mess and a half. Will Vance is on the fritz and he's not having it. So chapter 33. So at this point, he has resolved that he's going to have to end her. And before Betty Papaleo went on to glory, because she sure did, children, she did. It didn't take him long, but essentially he cornered her. I don't want to tell y'all how he did it. I'll just say that he followed her till he found a convenient spot, and then he did the deed, and then yeah. So he had her killed, and then he called he called a skunk team member and basically told them to buy 2 tickets to Mexico, one for Betty, and he needed to backdate the ticket for 2 weeks ago, and then one for her husband Darren, which would have signified that he was leaving on Thursday, June 22nd. But he said, make sure that Darren doesn't get on that flight. So essentially, they bought these tickets, but now they're gonna have to kill her husband Darren. They've already killed her. They're gonna have to kill Darren. And I was like, no, not the husband. Stacey, you gonna take out the husband too? What did he do? He didn't do anything wrong. Because Howard Wynn actually, you know, he sent her this stuff for her to go down this rabbit hole in the first place. Like, oh man, it's so much. I will tell you this, guys, because the book is really good. And I've already told you what we're working on or what we're reading in preparation for the next video, and that is we are doing chapters 34 through 45, and that is going to cover Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so that'll be our next read. This is wild, children. Let me just tell you, like, saints and ain'ts, let me tell you something. This is completely out of pocket. And what I will tell you is there were a couple of times where I was reading this book, my butt clenched up real tight. I lost, like, my pattern of breathing started to increase a little bit more. I could feel my face doing this number right here, trying to figure out what was going on. And it's just, it's so much. It's so much. At one point, I thought Jared got shot, and I was just like, whoo. And I was actually saying those things, giving sound effects as I was reading the book. This is so wild. So here's what I will say. if you really are one who enjoys that type of thriller, type of on edge type of situation, I would say y'all go get this book, go get it and read it and reread it. Because, well, I don't know if you want to reread it when you've already found out the things, but maybe read it, put it down for maybe about 4 or 5 years, pick it up and read it again. But I will go over those chapters like I mentioned next week, and we'll jump back in and do the things. But this is a phenomenal book. I will say one more thing about this book. I really wish someone could read this book, adopt the rights of it, and they could turn this into like a mini series of some sort, kind of like what's that show with Nicole Kidman and Reese Witherspoon, and all of the people, is it Big Little Lies? Because it's because at one point during the quarantine, we had Big Little Liars, Pretty Little Liars, Little Fires, and Fires, Little Liars. Like, we had so much of that going on. So I think I'm telling you the right one. I'll probably try to give you a screenshot and let you know what I'm talking about. But that show was really, really good. And if they actually, here's my thing, if someone could adopt the rights to this book and turn it into a mini series and give the necessary production, like give it Shondaland Productions. Because here's the thing too, my friend asked me in a book club, she was like, what is this in comparison to? Is this like Scandal? Is it How to Get Away with Murder? What is it? And I was like, girl, it's not. It's not. It's a hybrid. It's not none of that. It's not none of it. It's none of it. At this point, listen, it's structured like, I don't want to say it's structured like Little Fires everywhere. It's structured like, some shenanigans are gonna pop off. They introduce you to the shenanigans at the beginning of the story, but then for the rest of it, you're trying to figure out who done it and if everything is gonna be done in time. That's really what this is. So I told my friend, I was like, this girl, none of Scandal. This is something completely different and in its own lane. And honestly, I would not mind seeing this on a little or big screen. I would prefer a little screen and a mini series because there are so many different days to cover. I don't think that a movie would do it justice. I don't think that drawing this out over maybe 3 or 4 seasons, but honestly, I don't even think drawing this out for 3 or 4 seasons would actually do it justice either, because of the short amount of time. It's literally like a week and a half to 2 weeks of a timeline series. And I think that knowing that this is the pressure of all of the things, I think that we could get like a mini series of maybe like 10 episodes out of this particular production and work. You can let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree with me that this could be a mini series? Because I feel like it could. But let me know in the comments what your thoughts. We will kiki and do this all over again next week. So until next time, Saints and Ain'ts, I'll be seeing you. Bye.